As we all know, this Me Too movement, as I would like to call it, has been very active all over the world, but very much so in Sweden. And I just want to share some reflections on the understanding of why and what this is all about. How can we understand the phenomenon of sexual harassment and what we have been now very much aware of, that it's about not talking about something that is evidently very, very common all over the place, and of course also in Sweden. So I would say that my main reflection is, of course, it's because of the gender awareness that we have achieved through years of education and discussions and reflections, that this has been possible to talk about and write about and share in the Swedish context, maybe more than in other contexts. So some reflections about these collective movements I will share with you now in times of Me Too. And I would say that gender as a field of knowledge is partly connected to research and theories and theorizing. So very much is about gender awareness is based on knowledge and sharing knowledge. So it's very much about research. What does gender mean in societies, in organizations, etc. But also it's very crucial that we look upon perceive gender as social and cultural constructs, not as something given once and for all. And the power perspective is very, very central in all gender theorizing. So what about gender equality? That is something else. That is, compared to gender theory, something that is much more in practice. It's about work for change. It's about political goals for gender equality and very much being part of the work for change in societies, in organizations, but of course also on an individual level. We are all sort of part of that, reflecting and thinking about your own identity and values, I would say, regarding this. So me as a professor and a scholar in this field, I'm very used to that a lot of people feel sort of discomfort when we talk about gender issues, feminism, gender equality, whatever connected to that field of research. And I've also done quite a lot of research about these common reactions. Why do people feel slightly not very at ease when we talk about this? And there are several explanations to this. One is that it's connected to the idea that it's sort of a negative way of talking, focusing on the problems instead of the solutions. And I would say that that is partly why this has been so hidden, that it's kind of not okay to share these experiences, because then you become the problem. It's also, there are some gendered reactions of discomfort. And if we start with the category of men, a lot of men feel discomfort because they feel that this is somehow connected to guilt and being accused, feeling accused as a man of different kinds of inequalities. And of course, that is not a nice feeling. So it's very important to have the structural analysis to see that we are part of structures. The same goes for women that feel discomfort, because they feel stigmatized as being pointed at as the other, the problem, the victims. And this is not a positive identity either. So it's very, very important to have the perspective of structures, that it's structural, but also that it's about power and power relations. So what is the problem? Of course, it's about that there is some systematic thing going on in society that we might call the gender order. And if we look at it closely, it's very often related to the main problem is that men are slightly highly valued than women in some sense. And this is the same with sexual harassment. There is a difference in the values, the respect of sort of human value here. And it's about structures of inequality. So in what ways are these gender order expressed in society? There are 4 very classic ways of describing the expressions. And these are related to either economic difference, differences in power and influence, representation. There are differences in the responsibilities for unpaid care work, but also the differences in bodily integrity, where we can now link the Me Too movement to this, somehow connected to sexual violence, sexual harassment. So it's very important also to see that when I see that gender is socially and culturally constructed, it's very important to be specific about when we talk about gender difference. It's not about essence, it's not about natural or functional differences. Inequality is not natural. It's about the conditions that we meet as human beings every day in our daily lives. Conditions are about how we are being treated, the expectations we meet, the ideals, norms, etc. And not only that, but also take into account the consequences of this in terms of resources, possibilities, health, and a lot of other things. And this is what really makes the inequality obvious to us. These differences, making differences, have consequences. So we usually divide expressions of inequality into these 4 categories, where we can see discrimination could be related to a lot of actions, like the way that we formulate, policies of salaries, promotion, a lot of things connected to work life, development, opportunities, etc. Sexual harassment and harassment is sort of one group of inequality in itself that has been treated this way. It's not a new phenomenon. In research, we have been talking about and doing research about sexual harassment since, I would say, early 80s or even late 70s. Then I'm talking about the 1970s. So it's really not a new phenomenon to us scholars. But we also talk about inequalities in other terms. It's not only about the things that happen, it's also about the things that do not happen. The non-actions, the invisibility, the lack of recognitions, for instance. Very common in academic organizations. The discrimination might not be the things that actually happen to you, but the things that do not happen in comparison to male colleagues, etc. So this we know quite a lot about. We talk also about exclusion and inclusion in relation to culture, organizational culture, as an explanation. There are several motives for gender equality work and diversity work. And you can, we could go into either of these that I have named here and see that they are valid in different contexts, depending on if you're in the cultural sector or academic sector, or if you're in the public sector or in private business, you will use different arguments. Why should you work for gender equality? And there is not one answer that is right or wrong. It's a matter of values, and you have to be very careful about the way that you actually talk about these arguments, because that is sort of the the answer to why. When we talk about gender equality goals, what is the thing that we try to achieve? It's very important to see that there are both, of course, quantitative goals in terms of numbers, but also qualitative. It's very much about culture and values and these things that we cannot measure in the same way. We can measure it, but we have to use other methods. So today, in Sweden, in the Swedish context, in the European context, we often use this strategy of gender mainstreaming. It's a gender equality strategy. It means that you should mainstream the work for change into the normal processes, into the normal behaviors and groups, the actors that normally take decisions and are involved in decisions should have this knowledge. And I think this is partly a result of long-term work for gender equality, that we raise the gender awareness in all groups, in groups of managers, most of all. It's very important. So at KTH, how do we, at this university where we are right now, how do we work with this strategy of gender mainstreaming at the university? We have prioritized in our plans for actions 4 different parts when we formulate goals. It's about organizing the work for gender equality to see that we have representatives from top down that actually have knowledge and have the goals and know the problems. It's about creating equal conditions. It's about creating inclusive cultures. But we have to do this through raising awareness and sharing knowledge. So to sum up and connect to this movement going on right now, and the theme for this, these talks about the individual and the collective, I think it's a very nice example of this social movement is about sharing individual experience. The energy, it starts with an individual experience of inequality. But as long as it is only your own individual experience, nothing will happen. So the energy and the action takes place when we share. So it's about contributing to collective gender awareness. That is what happens when you share your experience, and when you suddenly see that this is not only about me, this is about a structure, and it's also about a culture hiding and supporting this kind of behavior. So I think it's very important to move from individual to collective to inspire and require action for change. And it's about change both on a society level and an organizational level. Thank you.
Tack så mycket. Thank you.